Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into Azure fundamentals. We're on episode 4 now, and today we're going to be tackling two really important concepts: cloud models and the consumption-based model.
You got it. I mean, these are foundational to really getting how cloud computing works, right? We're going to break down those different ways you can set up and use cloud resources, which are the cloud models, and then we'll dive into the financial side, how that whole pay-as-you-go thing actually works. By the end, you should have a super clear picture of both.
Let's jump right in. So first up, cloud models. This is all about how you actually deploy those cloud resources, and there are a few different ways to go about it.
That's right. Our sources highlight those core models: private, public, and hybrid cloud. Plus, we'll touch on some cool variations and how they fit into the whole picture.
Okay, let's start with private cloud. Our material describes it like the next evolution of a traditional data center, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's like taking your regular corporate IT setup, but instead of everything being strictly on premises, you're delivering those IT services over the internet. But, and this is key, it's only for that one organization, like their own dedicated cloud.
So it's still their own little world.
Exactly. And the big advantage there, like the material really emphasizes, is control. You have way more control over your data and your systems, which for some businesses, especially those with strict security or compliance needs, that's not just a perk, it's a necessity. Think about industries like national defense or finance, where keeping their data completely separate and secure is non-negotiable.
Right. You can see how in highly regulated industries, that level of control over where their data lives and who can access it would be absolutely crucial. But there's got to be a trade-off, right?
Well, yeah. Our sources point out that private clouds can be pricier, often lacking the instant scalability you find with some other models.
Makes sense. More control, potentially more cost.
And remember, that whole upfront investment. Private cloud often means shelling out a good chunk of change for the infrastructure itself, even if it's not physically in their building. Like, it could be offsite in a dedicated facility managed just for them, but it's still a big initial cost. And then if they need to scale up quickly, well, that might mean getting and setting up more hardware, which takes time.
Which brings us to public cloud. I feel like this is what most people picture when they hear cloud. It's that whole massive infrastructure managed by a third-party provider, and anyone who wants to use it can, as long as they're paying, right?
Exactly. What sets public cloud apart is that those resources are available to, well, the public. Like, think of the big names, those huge data centers they have. Countless organizations and even individuals are using them. That shared nature is what makes them so cost-effective and lets them scale so easily. Need a boost in computing power? Boom, you can usually get it almost instantly.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. A small startup can suddenly handle traffic spikes like a global giant, all without needing massive upfront investments.
Absolutely. And that accessibility, that's the big difference from a private cloud. It's not limited to just one organization.
So we've got private, where it's all yours, and public, where it's shared. What about those organizations that want the best of both worlds?
Hybrid cloud. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so hybrid cloud is pretty much what it sounds like, a combo, right? Linking your private cloud with a public cloud environment.
You got it. And the magic here is flexibility. Let's say you suddenly have way more traffic than usual, a big spike in demand. With a hybrid setup, you could tap into those public cloud resources to handle the extra load and then scale back down when things calm down. You've got your secure base in the private cloud, but you can grab some extra muscle from the public cloud when you need it.
So you get the security and control of private cloud with the scalability and cost effectiveness of public cloud. It's like having your cake and eating it too.
Kind of, yeah. And don't forget about the security advantages. The material points out that hybrid cloud lets you strategically choose where to keep different services and data. Like, super sensitive stuff stays locked down in the private cloud, but maybe less critical, more public-facing applications can run in the public cloud.
This raises a good point, though. How do you manage all those different environments effectively?
Right. And that brings us to multi-cloud. This is where you're not just using one public and one private cloud, but multiple public cloud providers at the same time.
That's a lot of clouds. Why would an organization do that?
There are actually a few good reasons. Our sources mention wanting to use specific features that are best in class from different providers. Maybe one cloud is amazing for AI, while another have a killer platform for data analytics, so they use both. Or maybe they're transitioning between providers and need to use both for a while.
I see. But managing all that must be pretty complex.
Yeah, for sure. The big challenge, as our sources highlight, is managing resources and keeping everything secure across all those different platforms. It's like juggling, but instead of balls, it's entire cloud environments. You need a solid plan and good tools to make it work.
Speaking of good tools, what about Azure Arc? It sounds like it's built to handle some of that complexity.
Azure Arc is like a command center for your entire cloud ecosystem. What's really cool is that it lets you manage resources no matter where they're running,
Hmm.
Azure itself, your own data center, a hybrid setup, even across multiple public clouds like AWS or Google Cloud. It's like having one remote that works for all your different TVs and sound systems, even if they're from different brands and in different rooms.
So it brings that consistent Azure management experience to all those different environments.
Exactly. It's all about flexibility and consistency, which is huge when you've got a diverse mix of cloud setups.
Got it. And then we have the Azure VMware solution. This one seems pretty specific.
Yeah, this is for organizations that are already heavily invested in VMware for their private cloud. It gives them a smooth way to expand into public or hybrid cloud without having to rebuild everything from scratch.
So instead of re-architecting all their applications and infrastructure to move to the cloud, they can essentially just pick up their existing VMware workloads and run them seamlessly on Azure.
You got it. It's about scalability and integration without requiring a huge overhaul of their current setup or a massive retraining of their IT staff.
To help sum all this up, our material includes a handy table comparing the key aspects of the main cloud models. For public cloud, it points out the lack of upfront capital expenditure when you need to scale, and you only pay for what you actually use. But you do trade off some control over the underlying infrastructure and security compared to other models.
Right. And then on the private cloud side, the table really stresses the complete control you get over your resources and security, and the fact that your data is all yours, not mixed in with anyone else's. But of course, you have to buy the hardware for both the initial setup and any ongoing maintenance, which can be expensive, and all that maintenance and updating, that's on you too.
And finally, hybrid cloud gets the gold star for flexibility, letting you decide where to run different applications and keeping control over those crucial things like security, compliance, and any legal requirements. It seems like each model has its own strengths and weaknesses, and what works best really depends on the specific needs and priorities of each organization. Okay, so we've covered the different ways to deploy those resources, but how do you pay for them? How does cloud pricing actually work?
All right, let's talk money. We touched on the cost effectiveness of the public cloud earlier, and that's directly tied to this whole idea of the consumption-based model.
And when it comes to IT expenses, our sources break things down into two main categories: capital expenditure, or CapEx, and operational expenditure, OpEx. Let's unpack those.
Sure. CapEx is those big one-time investments in assets you're going to own for a while, like building an entire data center from the ground up or buying a whole rack of new servers, big stuff.
So it's a substantial initial cost for things you expect to use for a long time, kind of like buying a company car.
Exactly. And then you have OpEx, which is more about those ongoing recurring costs for services or products over a period of time, like your monthly rent for office space or those software subscriptions you pay for regularly.
It's those day-to-day costs of running your business. And this is where cloud computing really flips the script. It operates on this consumption-based model, which falls squarely under OpEx.
Exactly. Instead of spending a ton of money up front on building and equipping your own infrastructure, you're essentially paying for what you actually use, like how you pay for electricity or water each month.
So you avoid having to invest in physical infrastructure, the electricity to power it, and even the physical security for a data center. It's all taken care of.
And that shift from CapEx to OpEx comes with some big advantages. Our sources list a bunch, like no more huge upfront costs, which makes it easier to start new projects or even whole businesses.
That's a big deal. And the scalability is amazing too. Your costs scale with your usage, so if demand goes up, you pay more, but if it drops, you pay less. It's way more flexible than buying a fixed amount of hardware and hoping it's enough.
And that flexibility helps you avoid over-provisioning. With traditional infrastructure, you often have to guess how much capacity you'll need in the future, and if you guess wrong, you either end up with expensive hardware sitting idle, or you hit bottlenecks and have to scramble to get more. With a cloud, you can adjust your resources on the fly to match your actual needs.
So it's all about aligning your spending with your actual usage.
Exactly. And that leads to better operational efficiency. You're spending money on the services you're actually using, not on maintaining and potentially underutilizing a bunch of physical hardware.
Makes sense. Plus, it frees up your IT team to focus on more strategic work.
Absolutely. They can spend their time innovating and building cool stuff instead of racking and stacking servers. Our material also contrasts how the cloud changes the whole game of predicting future resource needs. Traditionally, you had to try and see into the future and figure out how much capacity you'd need, and if you got it wrong, well, you were either stuck with wasted money or scrambling to catch up.
It sounds stressful, but the cloud pretty much eliminates that guesswork.
For sure. You can instantly spin up virtual machines or grab more storage if you have a sudden traffic spike, and then just as easily scale back down when things calm down. You only pay for what you need when you need it.
So cloud pricing is based on that pay-as-you-go idea.
Right. It gives you way more control and flexibility when it comes to managing your IT budget. You can optimize your spending, make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck, and easily adapt to changes in your business needs.
The material uses a great analogy, comparing it to renting computing power and storage from a data center.
Hmm.
But the key difference is that you can return those rented resources when you're done with them, and you're only charged for the time you actually use them.
It's a much smarter way to handle your IT infrastructure.
So to recap, we've explored those different cloud deployment models: private, public, hybrid, even multi-cloud. We also look at Azure Arc and the Azure VMware solution, which address specific needs within that landscape. And we dug into the big shift in IT finances with the consumption-based model, moving away from those big upfront capital expenditures towards a more agile and flexible approach with operational expenditures. You should have a good grasp now on those core cloud concepts and how that pay-as-you-go system can offer some serious benefits over traditional on-premises infrastructure.
I hope so. Now think about how this all applies to you or organizations you know. How might that flexibility and scalability, along with those OpEx advantages, change how you approach and manage IT resources?
It's a lot to think about. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into cloud models and the consumption-based model. Thanks for joining us, and in our next deep dive, we'll be discussing the advantages of cloud high availability, scalability, and the concepts of reliability and predictability in the cloud. See you then.